Okay, so let me show you guys something that I didn't think about until after the engine was in. So I was having issues with this entire power steering setup, which has kind of, I guess they run like a little bit extra line for like a cooler and stuff, and it's got a banjo on each side because this is your high pressure line from your pump. This can be completely taken off your power steering rack before you try to install the engine. It'll save you a whole bunch of hassle. It'll give you a little bit more room, and you don't need it, assuming you get the kit from Minitech for the power steering adapter to use the Honda power steering pump. So what this is an adapter that bolts into your pump, and it goes to a, looks like a -6 AN line, and then it comes with an adapter from Vibrant that has a banjo with a -6 on it. So this goes on your rack. So the actual bolt where your high pressure line goes in, you see it's right there, this bung right there, right above your driver's side steering rack boot, and that's where the factory line goes in. So you just take that out, you'll put this Vibrant piece on there, and you can actually just put this on there and then wait until your pump's on there if you want to, so that you can make sure you clock this line right. But I didn't go through the kit and look enough before I started, and that's kind of my bad, being in a rush. But I'm super glad because I was able to take that out, look at my oil pan. Let me show you what we got underneath. So I didn't screw up the oil pan at all, other than some cosmetic stuff. So all of those lines that were here, that were sitting in here, were rubbing up right here, and it gouged it in the aluminum, but it wasn't enough. Does not look like it was enough to go through. So that's how we're sitting right now. So I'm gonna start working on some smaller stuff. I'm gonna try to look at the fuel system. It actually looks like the fuel system is gonna be a lot easier to set up than I thought it would. And once we get fuel system figured out, then I want to get straight into the wiring on this thing. Alright, so I've removed a bunch of these 90s from the 5/16 fuel lines. So the fuel line setup's going to be really simple. So we've got these two factory lines. One of them is a little bit smaller. It's a 1/4 inch, and that one is it's supposed to be for evap. But I'm getting rid of the vacuum evap system because we won't have anything to control it. So we can repurpose this evap line as our return, which works out good because it doesn't have the right shape for one of these quick disconnects to go onto it, but since it's return, it's not seeing pressure, I can just clamp it. So we've got our factory pressure regulator here. So it's got an inlet from the fuel tank, and then a return going back to the fuel tank. And then this is just vacuum, which is what controls the regulator. So I still have to pull the regulator out of the tank, but I already removed this line, and I'll show you guys underneath the car. But there's this line, so it is a return style fuel system, but instead of running a length of line all the way to the engine for the return, they put it in here and then put the regulator in the tank. So this was actually the return line. So I cut a couple of these 90s out of the end of these to reuse. But so up here, the larger line, which is 5/16, is going to get clamped onto this hose for the factory regulator. So that's the feed line from the fuel pump. And then this is our return line. I'm just gonna slide it on there and clamp that. Then up here is all good, and then I can bend these however I want them. So we'll go underneath. So going underneath here, a little bit hard to see, but so sitting right up here was your the charcoal canister, which has these two large tubes going to it. Right here and right here. these two large tubes are going to it. So I'm still gonna have to figure that out because those are just vents from the tank. But what you've got is a couple lines that go. You got a couple lines that go up through here above your fuel tank to the access panel on the top of it that's under your hat or your soft top. So here are the two lines that come from the engine. So this one's gonna end up being your feed. This one was your evap line. So we're gonna repurpose this as your return. So I removed that line from up there on the tank and removed it from down here. And then what you've got is your fuel filter right here. So this line comes down from your fuel pump, feeds into your fuel filter, and then it loops around to right here. Right, so there's another connector right here. So this connector, we're gonna put one of those 90s on, get some hose, and send it right over here to our other 5/16 line that goes to the engine. And then this evap line, we're just gonna run a hose up through here, and then it's gonna end up right up here. So this is your fuel pump access. So this is the return, because this is the line coming from your fuel pump going down to that fuel filter. So this is where we're gonna run that 1/4 inch line just with some clamps. So I still have to pull this out and take the regulator out of the tank because we've got that regulator up front, but that's where we're gonna run that. And then I still have to figure out what to do with these vents. I might tie them together for now and then try to come up with some kind of a vent that goes somewhere outside of the car so we're not smelling gasoline. But this thing right here was our charcoal canister, so I removed that. It's huge and I don't need it. But we're gonna try to button up the fuel system because it seems like it'll be quick and simple. And then once it's good, I'm thinking we're gonna have to pull this dashboard to do the wiring because it's behind everything in there. It's behind the HVAC and the dashboard and everything. So that's gonna be a little bit more involved than I expected, but we'll get it done. All right, so fuel system is done and good to go. So like I mentioned before, this is our return. It's the 1/4 inch line that used to be our evap. This is the send. So this is going to our regulator back here, and then it gets vacuum from this, which will go in our intake, and then this is the return. So going and looking here, we've got, this is our return. So this is a line that I ran down there with one of the 90s that came on the car. That is our send. That's the factory line that goes down to the fuel filter. And then down here we've got I've zip tied them together, but we got a line. We got the factory line that's coming down and feeding our fuel filter. It comes around on the other side. I used the 90 over there, ran that and looped it, and it comes down to right here, which is our send at the engine. And then that line that I ran down there from that return at the top of the tank, which used to be our evap vent, I just clamped it onto the 1/4 inch hose. So the line going to the engine is 5/16. The line coming back is 1/4 inch. So, and that's all that I should have to deal with as far as the fuel system. So it should be good to go. Okay, so I want to show you guys this. So I pulled the fuel pump assembly out of the tank in order to remove the regulator. So the way they've got it, this is the factory return, and they put the regulator on the end of it. So this fuel pressure regulator right here regulates the pressure and then lets the excess go back into there. So all we have to do in order to get rid of this, because there's already one on the engine, is pull this off of here, and then I can go ahead and put the entire fuel pump assembly back in there. This is a good time if you're going to upgrade your fuel pump. I'm just gonna leave that one in there because I don't really care right now. Alright, so we got the dashboard out. with some pretty crazy surprises on the way. So we definitely bought this car from Crackhead because there was some drugs in there. We threw them away, but not what I expected to find. It was a little vial like that big. Looked like crystal meth or something, but threw it away. And then I got the we got the HVAC off the firewall too, and I got the engine harness out. So all I got to do is pull that ECU and then figure out what I need to reuse from this. I know at least the oil pressure and coolant temperature sensor wires, but pretty sure there's gonna be a whole bunch of other stuff. So that was a big hurdle. It wasn't as hard as I thought, but I'm not gonna do a walkthrough on it. There's a very good how-to video. It's about 30 minutes long on YouTube about how to pull the dash and HVAC, but you have to do it. You can't reach any of this stuff. Even with the dash out, you still have to take the HVAC out, which is okay because we're removing the AC, so Billy's taking the radiator out of the HVAC anyway because we don't need it. And that'll give me a little bit more room on the firewall side. But yeah, got it taken care of. Pulled that old harness out. Now I can run the new one through and start figuring out wiring. Okay, so we're at the part of doing wiring on this. Now, what I did was I got a subscription to AllData and went through the Honda or the Mazda harness to try to match up everything that I need to send to the Honda harness. So the first thing I'm gonna do is try to get this through the wire or through the firewall so that I know which plugs go to which sensors, and then I'm gonna try to figure out all of the wiring, make sure it works, and then go through it with everybody so that anybody who is doing a swap in an NV Miata like this can go through and do it the same way that I did. It should be pretty simple. There's supposedly only like 8 things that you have to hook up. The main goal of matching it to the Mazda harness is that you get the same like idiot lights and the same gauges. So that's what I want to make sure I get right, that's actually going to work so that you guys can do it the same way. Because there's a lot of information on like the Facebook groups about this, but it's kind of mixed and scattered, and I want one video that'll actually show us how to do the wiring on this. So we're going to get to it, but first we got to get this harness through the firewall.
Kind of sealing.
Huh?
I'm seeing if it seals over that hole.
Oh yeah, it'll seal when I put self-tappers on it.
Ah, it's humid.
Real humid real quick. I'm sure a bunch of this is going to have to get pulled back in there, but I want to see where everything ends up sitting. This isn't even anything. This is just a dead Dale's,
what?
Dale's dead plug. This is just like a termination thing where they all get connected. I know this is, so I got that plastic thing I might end up putting back onto this, but this is alternator.
And hopefully that's the right bank we're putting that on.
Yeah.
What do you mean we're just shooting onto the closed valves?
We've plugged injectors on backwards at Pontiac before, so bad that they had to put out a warning to everybody saying, don't put your fucking injectors on backwards, idiots. Holy fuck. Christ.
When you were up there talking, I was just watching the camera lens fog up.
Yeah. Ridiculous. That definitely goes down there. So that ground is gonna go right there.
Oh, this looks like the oil pressures. The oil, or whatever that
that's
is.
all the VTEC stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a round one for your oil pressure.
Yeah. You can plug in those.
And what are you? Just a,
That's
is that a ground?
it's supposed to be
I can do the ends.
yeah, that is for the oil pressure sensor. The Honda one.
So there's two coolant sensors, but I guess you're only using the one that is on the bung they provided?
Both of those coolant sensors are being used. One of them is being used by the Honda gauge or the Mazda gauge. Wait. Why are there two coolant sensors? Like I think one is ECU and one of them is the gauge reading for the, I don't fucking know. This one,
Maybe one, yeah.
This one was right here from the factory, so this one goes here. Sensor's fucked up. Sweet.
No.
Sweet.
It'll be fine.
Does this harness not have a provision for fucking the EGR? I am going to take the EGR off. This got fucking ready to get some balls out of here.
Yeah.
Grab that impact. Alright, so this is the Mazda wiring harness. So there's certain things that we're going to use out of here. I know for a fact that I need to get the wiring from the Mazda oil pressure and then the Mazda coolant temperature, which I'll talk about real quick as a side note. I'm working on getting an inline setup for the Mazda coolant temperature sensor for the gauge. So I measured the threads on this one and they are M12 by 1.5. So I got an adapter making it 1/8 inch NPT, which fits in here. The only problem is the adapter that I got because of the sensor itself isn't gonna fit, it hits. So what I'm gonna try to do with this sensor is drill it out so that it fits, because it looks like we should have enough meat to drill it out in there, just enough to the point where it fits. But if I'm able to make that work, then I can put my coolant temperature gauge in line in the coolant system. So I'm not going to worry about this three-way connector right now, but I need to get it out of this harness along with the oil pressure from the Mazda and possibly one or two other things, but we'll see. But so the way this is set up, this went to the ECM, the Mazda ECM, and then there's this bulkhead connector that ties the engine harness into the rest of the harness. So everything that I need to steal from this to hook up to the Honda setup, I need to trace out where it goes from here and double check that I'm getting the right wire from the rest of the harness. And then I can take all the tape off this and pull it out of here. But we're gonna look into the rest of the wiring right now. Damn, I say okay so a whole lot. Okay, so what we're doing is we're going through, so this connector right here, this connector right here plugs into one of the vehicle harnesses, which is how everything gets tied back from the engine harness. So this side is the ECM from the Miata. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling out the wires I need, labeling what they are, and then when I'm done getting everything I need out of this, I'm going to pull it all the way out of this harness from where it goes, where it terminates over here. That way I can reuse this connector, and then all I got to do is cut these off and put the new terminals that they've got from the kit for everything that needs to plug into the flying lead on the Honda harness. And then the other thing is that this right here is our tach adapter, so it converts the pulses from 6 into 4 for the to get the tachometer right. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going through and labeling these, and then when I'm done, I'm going to pull them out, and then I'm going to hook these up where they need to go on the flying lead, and then anything that doesn't go through that flying lead that still needs to be hooked up, that's all that I'm going to have left to figure out. But this is the unit that comes with the Minitech kit, and this is the factory Honda temp sensor. One of two of them, apparently. Oh, is it tied in place real nice? It ought to work. bitch.
Might have to use a wrench on that one.
Yeah, that one's gonna need a wrench. Need a 15 wrench.
I definitely feel like they could have designed that exhaust better.
Yeah, it definitely could have been made better. Like, it's cool that I don't have to make it, but holy shit, they could have made this better.
Let's see. Well, it's just gonna keep the transmission warm. It's good.
Yeah,
It's all good.
it'll be good. It'll be fine.
Mint.
Fucking mint. I'll destroy all my brand new tattoos. Fucking wrenching these exhausts on here. Oh shit. So this is the wire for the O2 sensor. It's not long enough for some reason. We were just barely able to snake the O2 sensor from the Y pipe up between the firewall and here. I ordered an O2 extension for a 4-wire Honda O2 sensor, but just for testing purposes we're gonna leave it plugged in like that. But I'm definitely gonna want to get an extension because there's gonna be some more stuff in the way here. So I was able to get the inlet, the coolant inlet hose on, and it's just kind of dangling because I still gotta figure out some routing on that. And then I've got a, let me get it. So they sell 1.25" tubing. This was made for like deleting your heater core or something online, so it was just a 180. So I just cut this out of it. I just got a short section here, which is going to go on like this onto the coolant outlet. So then I'll be able to run both tubes on this side. And when you're doing this, it's better to do one coolant line on each side of the engine. The only thing you have to do is that housing that comes from Minitech has to be flipped. But in order for you to be able to get the connector to plug in for the engine coolant temperature sensor, you're gonna need to grind some off of the transmission, which we didn't do, and it's too late. So we're gonna run both coolant lines on this side of the engine, but luckily there's plenty of holes in the subframe. We'll be able to zip tie those coolant lines too. Yeah, I can trim that a little bit better, but
Race car, it was good.
for testing purposes, not like I'm putting coolant in it to start it. I'm just putting that there so I don't have to do it again when the intake manifold goes on. It's only gonna rattle really bad.
A race car.
Yeah, right. Okay, let me see it. So this is a better view of what we got. I know it's not the best. Everything in here is pretty tight, but we've got our housing, and that's going out at an angle down there, and then turning around and running to the front. And then this one right here, I got this little 90, so I'll shoot this over to the side too. But it's pretty tight back here. I would also suggest taking your regulator loose and rotating it, because this is pointing right at the firewall here for your for your inlet for the regulator or whatever. Definitely make sure you get an EGR delete and your secondary air assist, whatever it's called, delete.
So this is for the alternator?
So this one's for the starter, and then the one at the end of it should be white. It's hanging out up here somewhere. That's for the alternator. So right here you've got these two wires, and I'll show you what they come into. So this is what goes on your starter on the Miata.
Move it over.
That's what we that's the wire that sits up in here on the body harness. And there's actually 2 wires that go into this wire. So we cut this off, we took those 2 wires, stripped them back, crimped them onto a longer wire, and this is going to go to the starter. And then this goes to your alternator, and this is how your battery gets charged back up. So I'm going to extend this wire over the top of the engine, and this one I'm going to run over to the starter.
Does Minitech tell you to do anything about this?
No. No, they don't talk about the wiring. They have a little piece of paper. This is what Minitech gives you. I was marking it up, but this is a very basic version of what you need to do. I'm going to go through all the wiring here sometime, assuming it's right, and kind of try to make an explanation of how to do it. But it wasn't too hard.
Are you ready?
I'm not. Well, let's think for a second. I can key on, listen for the fuel pump, make sure the relay's working. Before anything, I need to put oil in this engine. Looks more like an engine.
Yep.
I got the throttle body on it. I gotta hook up all the vacuum lines. I think with this one, I can just cut the Honda one and take off the Mazda one, or I can cut the Mazda one. They'll both fit, and that's for the brake. I'm gonna try cutting the Mazda one because it doesn't matter.
I think we have some line that we can run.
We can run a line, just put some new line on it and loop it around. And then this will suck in because that's gonna be sucking into there and drawing through, so it'll actually suck in through here. So later I'm gonna put that, I got this little air filter. I'm gonna put a double barb on it and just extend it out here and clamp it right there so it's filtered air.
I think those bolts are way too long.
Oh fuck. They didn't fucking...
No, they're not like through.
Oh, they welded over the back side of the hole. Come on, Minitech, what the fuck? You don't put any fucking hardware in with your shit? Like, oh my god. Find some specific assholes.
Underneath the jump pack.
Yeah. But it's turning.
Yep.
I don't know if it's getting fuel or if it's still waiting for fuel. Should be getting fuel. Let me go grab the jump pack.
Okay.
Alright, so we figured out what was wrong with the wiring. It was the power going to the ECU was on a fuse that doesn't get power while you're cranking. So we got it to fire over for just a couple times. Didn't even really start it, but now we put it back together and we are ready to see if it'll start. Doesn't have any coolant lines hooked up. I still have to take the intake manifold back off and finish putting the car together, but this is us with our first start of the J Series V6 Miata. Was on the wrong ECU. So now I'm gonna put the right ECU in it. All right, try this with the right ECU. Gotta figure out the IAC, but god damn.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. Great job, everyone. Okay, well, where we're at, we've got the main coolant hoses for in and out plumbed. I got my temp sensor here. I was hoping I could have gone off the other side by flipping that thermostat housing, but because of the sensor, I would have had to grind some off the transmission, and it was already in by the time I realized it. I know a lot of people will go one on each side, but I actually think this works out better because I was able to find this heater hose at AutoZone that fits perfectly around everything in my engine bay. And those are already plumbed and they're both coming off this side. The second one down in there, I was able to use a 90-degree 1.25 inch piece of pipe to go around the steering shaft. And so that was actually the easy part to plumb. The hard part I'm working on right now is trying to get these lines going to the heater core. So we're getting close to being able to pressure test this coolant system. And once we pressure test the coolant system, all we gotta do is we gotta wire up this for our temperature gauge. I gotta fill up the power steering and bleed it. Something I'm gonna do soon is get this clutch reservoir plumbed into this line that we've got to replace the hard line, and get that hooked up so that the clutch is working, bleed that. But she's getting close. Right now it's just putting things back together. So I gotta go back to the store and return the other heater hose that I got and try to grab some more heater core 90s and some clamps, because it's a little bit tight back there and I'm just trying to route those heater core hoses around everything. We just pressure tested the coolant system. So coolant system is good. Bring it over here, I'll show you how we plumbed it. So you can't see the coolant inlet because it's down below there, but it goes to a 90-degree bend that comes up this way, and then this right here follows it. We were able to find this tube for the upper radiator hose, which worked out perfectly. I had to cut like just a few inches off the end of it, but it worked out perfectly because I have these hoses right here, and it goes right around them. So the part number for this, it's a Continental. Part number is 62308 or E72049 or 20241064. But that hose worked out great. They had it at AutoZone on the shelf. So coolant test's good. I got the heater hoses hooked up and it actually worked out better than I expected. You gotta remember, on most cars, at least most of the ones I've worked on, and especially Hondas, because they always do things with General Motors, and it's just kind of a standard. The sizes on your heater core, it's usually a 5/8 and a 3/4. One of them's a little bit bigger than the other. So that's the issue that I ran into. That's why you can see some of these clamps are pulling down a little bit on some of the hoses. So down, the two heater hoses come out directly under this fuel pressure regulator. So they come out down there. So we've got two 90-degree rubber heater core hoses that we got from AutoZone. Ran them up to these 90s and straight across to two more 90s out, or the rubber molded 90s. These are brass 90s right here, and they just have a bar bend on them. So it's got a 90 coming up on both of these hoses, goes to these brass 90s, goes across to some straight sections, and then into another rubber molded 90. So heater core is good to go. Everything fluid wise is hooked up. We just put 2 bottles of Redline gear oil into the transmission, and as far as fluids goes, all we have to do now is fill up and bleed our power steering. Since this pressure tested good, we're going to first vacuum fill the engine with water. That way, if there's any coolant left in there, it'll get diluted and I can flush it out, and then before it gets too cold later on, once we've ran the car through its paces, we can put 50/50 in it. But for right now, we're gonna fill it with water. I'm gonna put the intake back on. So this car actually has now 3 temperature sensors from what I understand. There's like one on the inlet and one on the outlet back there. And then we've got this one that just runs our gauge. And the reason I put that on our coolant out is so that I know when the thermostat opens up. If I would have put it on the coolant in, it would have shown warm before the car actually got up to temperature. So some of this stuff I'm gonna have to zip tie a little bit more. I did some tidying up, but we're at the point. Oh, and another thing we did, we replaced the metal hard line for the clutch. So this is a Technofit, I believe it's called, braided stainless clutch line. Ran it through where the factory one is, ran it down there to the clutch slave cylinder, which comes with a couple of spacers. Minitech was kind enough to send me the spacers because they weren't in my kit originally. Put those on there, bled the clutch. Clutch seems to work great. And we were very close to being able to start this up and drive it. One thing I do need to do is take the factory exhaust off of the car so that it's not dangling down there. Eventually I'm going to put my Mazda speed exhaust on the car and match it up to the Y-pipe that came in the Minitech kit. But we're pretty close. The one thing that I did not get to doing was modifying the throttle cable bracket. So I'm gonna have to modify the throttle cable bracket so that I have throttle pedal. But other than that, I mean, she's coming together. So we're really close. Even if I don't get to drive this thing tonight, I'm at least gonna get to the point where I'll be able to start it up, let it warm up, see if it'll get down to a nice good idle, and then hopefully tomorrow we'll go for a ride. So should be done pretty soon, or at least close to done. It's never actually gonna be completely done. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is this thing is ready to start. We got fluids in it. I do need to bleed the power steering, but I want the pump going first. You can see over here, Billy is in the car, and he's gonna go ahead and start it up in a second, and I'm gonna start filling some fluids. We're just gonna let it heat up and hope that the thermostat opens up, but I also want to test to see if my my gauge works and make sure we've got oil pressure on the gauge. And the only thing we haven't really done as far as wiring is wire in the tach adapter. So the tachometer is off, but it's still reading. So that's something I'll probably end up doing tomorrow. But I want to get this thing up to temperature now that it's, you know, 90% ready to go. Because the only real reason I can't drive it right now is because I don't have the front struts, or yeah, front shocks. I don't have those in. I don't have the wheels on it. I don't have the tires aired up. Billy's been doing a great job putting the interior back together, but I don't have a throttle cable hooked up. So we're just gonna go ahead and let this thing start, warm up, get up to temperature. All right, start it back up. Doing what it does when the IEC is sticking. I probably need to pull the throttle body off. clear this jack. Oh, that's close. It's wild. We'll get a proper driving video once I've got exhaust on it, but other than a couple noises that I'm hearing and the fact that it needs an alignment, it's awesome. It's great. Everything's working. The temp gauge is working. The thermostat's working. The fan's just kicked on. So I'm gonna go ahead and take Billy for a ride after I figure out. I'm hearing one noise I want to try to fix, and then we'll get back in there trying to make it a little bit better and get the exhaust on it, and just try to enjoy it while we got it for the rest of the year. So thanks for watching.